Twisted moral codes, obsession over cases, and police corruption are all tackled in John Lee Hancock's The Little Things. While it swings for the fences and succeeds in some places, it falls short in others. Let's talk about it. Written 28 years ago by John Lee Hancock, who also made films such as The Blind Side, The Highwayman, and Saving Mr. Banks, The Little Things follows Joe Deke Deacon as he ventures back into Los Angeles and stumbles upon a series of homicides that become eerily close to a case from his past. He unofficially joins the case and starts helping Jim Baxter, the new detective who essentially replaced him in the LAPD homicide department. As another victim is taken and the pressure begins to mount with the lack of evidence, the two hone in on the incredibly suspicious Albert Sparma. Clocking in at 2 hours and 7 minutes, this movie is a very slow burn. It's available in theaters and on HBO Max, which is where I watched it. It tries to reinvent the cop, thriller, detective, murder, mystery genre. It'll even make you think of some classics like David Fincher's Seven or even Training Day, which also stars Denzel Washington. But while these movies deal with the serial killer and overall systemic corruption, respectively, The Little Things tries to make you empathize and put yourself in the shoes of these detectives and really try to understand the emotional and psychological toll that their jobs take on them. While I enjoyed the movie and thought it was an overall good time, I do think that it falls short in the moment that we're currently living in. And when you stop to think about the actual implications of the message and story that it's trying to portray, things get a little dicey. Denzel Washington is great as Joe Deacon. He has a very naturalistic delivery, he's grounded in every scene, and he really portrays the tormented nature of Deacon extremely well. This is a character who lost his job 5 years ago, got divorced, had a triple bypass surgery, all because of a triple homicide that he couldn't solve. He even visualizes the victims in his room at night. He's constantly haunted. He's never left truly alone, and Washington brings that to his performance. There's a reason why he has 2 Academy Awards. He's even had a lifetime of acting in films where he plays a variety of cops on both sides of the coin, such as in films like the aforementioned Training Day, also Deja Vu, even Two Guns. So Washington is a great part of this movie. Rami Malek as Baxter is very unique. He's supposed to be the hopeful, charismatic, idealistic, rising star in the department, but we never really see his investigative skills at work. He's introduced as a great detective, but as soon as Deacon comes onto the scene, he kind of steals the show. We get the feeling that Deacon is much better at being a detective than Baxter is. Baxter also starts off the film not really liking Deacon, and then even though his captain warns him not to work with him, he changes his mind, and we never really get a good reason as to why he does. I think Malek really shines when the character becomes more unhinged and a little bit more frustrated with what's going on and not being able to solve this case that's really weighing on him. But at the very beginning, it's a little bit jarring to see him in this role. I do wish that there was more time to see Malek and Washington develop a chemistry with one another. There was a relationship there that wasn't very believable, and as the movie continues going forward, they get closer and closer without any justification as to why that is. In fact, Baxter just feels like a vehicle for Deacon's retribution. Deacon even says as much when he tells Baxter that the only reason he's on the case is for himself rather than the victims. Finally, we get to Jared Leto playing Sparma, the last of the 3 main characters in the film. Honestly, I think that Leto did a really good job in this movie. They did everything they possibly could to make him the sleaziest person ever. They gave him greasy hair, they made it look like his eyes had deep bags under them, hollowed out cheekbones, an unkempt beard. They even gave him brown eye contact lenses, which I don't know why brown eyes are creepy, but that's fine, totally okay. They even gave him a prosthetic nose and a belly, all of the things to make you think that this is the guy we're looking for. They want you to know that he's the most suspicious suspect that we have. So while some people have complained about Leto's performance being over the top, I think that's what the movie was going for. They give everything to Leto's character so that your mind is set on him, so that you believe that Baxter and Deacon are justified in what they're doing. I actually think that Leto stood out the most of the big three, which is interesting to say because Denzel and Rami are fantastic. It just felt that with the slower pace of the movie, Leto's energy, whether it was over the top or not, just brought a life to the film every single time that he was on screen. He was even the comic relief character for the movie, which was jarring. Now, this movie starts off compelling. You have a scene with a woman being chased down in a car by the killer and you want her to get away, and you go into it knowing that you have 3 Academy Award-winning actors all on the same project. But unfortunately, after that first scene, you get bogged down with all of this information that really is superfluous to the overall story. They throw detectives at you, crime scene information that you don't really need or ever comes back, and you're just sitting there wondering what's important and what's not. And I watch my movies with subtitles, so I was able to get all of those little details, but if you don't, I can totally see how you'd miss out on some major clues. This movie is set in October 1990 in Los Angeles. There's lots of beautiful cinematography with these lesser-known parts of the city, even though the city is the most photographed of all time, and it was really cool to see those locations. However, with the time period, it takes a little bit to adjust to the fact that there's no instant communication. If these characters just had smartphones, a lot of the time these issues would be resolved almost instantaneously. But the biggest problem I have is the time period. Now, usually you can divorce the movie from where it's set, but because it has such a realistic undertone, it's important to understand what's going on in the time of 1990 in the LAPD. The LAPD at the time was the most corrupt. They had the 1992 riots. They also had the Rampart scandal where cops were torturing citizens and they were selling drugs. So all of this was going on in my head as I was watching this film because the movie is asking you to have empathy for these detectives who are breaking the law. They're chasing down this guy who they only have circumstantial evidence for and nothing else to really base all of their guilty notions about him on. Not only that, but the movie asks way too much of you as a viewer. There are several behaviors that these characters do that just don't align with people who are supposed to be these great detectives with amazing clearance rates. Plus, while I understand the frustrations of needing to catch a serial killer and being presented with victim after victim with no evidence in sight and mourning families that you want to bring closure to, I just don't feel like that warrants breaking the law. I feel like we need to have universal standards for everyone, otherwise we have officers taking matters into their own hands. For example, Baxter and Deacon follow Sparma around, basically stalk him for days on end, even breaking into his apartment, all on a gut feeling. They don't have any hard evidence other than the fact that Sparma's a huge creep, he's a crime buff, and he has a bunch of circumstantial evidence that might mean that he's the killer. This movie does everything it can to make the little things add up in our minds and in the minds of the character that this is our guy. But when it stops short of giving us absolute certainty, it asks us how far we would go to solve a case. Maybe that's the point. Or maybe it's trying to tell us that there are some lines that no one should cross. This movie tries to show us that there's no good guys or bad guys, that we live in a world of gray. But we still end up rooting for Baxter and Deacon, especially Deacon. His backstory is so tragic that you want him to get some form of catharsis, that you want him to solve this unsolved case that's haunted him for 5 years. In the end, no one's hands are clean. I think there's a big discussion to be had over the validity of detectives taking matters into their own hands. Their jobs are extremely difficult. They are presented with the worst of humanity all of the time. But we've seen what that kind of leniency to police officers does in the real world, and I don't believe we need to see any more validation of that in the films that we watch. At the end of the film, we simply don't know if the protagonists are justified in all of these illegal actions that they're taking. We aren't clued into who the killer really is. So all that we're left with is a man who is extremely sketchy and who the detectives became obsessed with putting behind bars. I will say that the ending is very different from other films in this same genre, but while it does subvert expectations, its message suffers because of it. It becomes very unclear. I just don't know what it's trying to say. Is it a commentary on how detectives shouldn't become vigilantes because all they'll do is cause more harm than good? Or is it a commentary on how we should feel sorry for or even try to understand detectives who become traumatized by these horrific cases that they're tasked with solving? The little things might be how we catch notorious serial killers, but in no way should the little things also be how officers hide their own crimes. Overall, The Little Things has a great premise, a good setup, and strong performances. The actors really did the best that they could with what they were given. It's shot beautifully, and it does try to be a little bit different on the classic detective thriller. For these reasons, I think that it's good enough for a movie night. But only if you go into it knowing that it isn't a high-stakes action flick and that it mainly focuses on the psychology of its characters. Its pacing is slow and a bit inconsistent, but my main conflict with the film was the fact that I don't know what its message was. The way that Deacon and Baxter chose to deal with Sparma just made me not love the movie. I just don't know if we're meant to condemn them, forgive them, or understand them. Because of that, I do think the movie gives you a lot to think about, which is why you should watch it if you can deal with all of the cons I just mentioned. Be sure to comment down below to let me know if you plan on watching The Little Things, or if you've already seen the movie, let me know if you agree or disagree with my points. As always, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye! If you liked this video, be sure to give us a thumbs up and subscribe. Ring that bell to be notified every single time that we upload a video. We'd love to see you again. We've got a lot of reviews and commentary on all things anime, movies, TV, and video games coming your way. Thanks so much for tuning in, and I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful day.